All right, everyone, welcome to Papo Fluente podcast. This is your episode number 16, and I'll be not interviewing myself, but this is going to be an opportunity for me to introduce myself to the audience. So, today's episode is with teacher Alan. Right, that's right, that's me. So if you guys don't know me, my name is Alan. I'm originally from Brazil, São Paulo to be more specific, and I started this page back in 2017, right? And the idea of the page, I will talk more about it, but was sharing my journey to learning and teaching English. So at that time, I used to teach English, and I will talk more about it as well. But that was the idea, share some content in English for people who were still learning and looking for content to practice, especially their listening skills, right? So, the first topic I want to talk about is how did I learn English? How I started to learn English. So, I will need to go back when I was a child because if you are from Brazil, you know that in some schools we learn English. Yeah, that's right. We speak Portuguese in Brazil, but we do learn English in school. But the thing is, we learn English as we learn other subjects, such as math, history, Portuguese, science, right? So before I got to a private school, the first time I started studying English was when I was 11 years old, right? So I went to a private school. So before that, I was in a public school. I remember my mom teaching me some words in English here and there, like colors or maybe simple words like house, tree, apple, things like that. But I started to learn English in school when I was 11 years old. And the experience was very challenging because I didn't have the opportunity to learn English before. So when I got there, I was a little bit afraid of what was coming, like what I was about to learn. So I had to take some extra classes right away. So right away, I had to take twice a week some extra classes in English just to keep up with my friends because in that private school, they were learning English since they were 7. And I just started learning when I was 11, right? But the thing is, I learned English during school, so for elementary school, for high school. But the thing is, it wasn't anything practical. It was just theory, and to be honest, it was very shallow. It wasn't like detailed. It was more like grammar or like simple sentences. There was no room for practice conversation, so it was very theoretic, right? But after that, I started university, right? College, and I was studying sports management, nothing related to English at that time. But I remember I was like, because I was always passionate about soccer, so I I loved playing soccer growing up. So that was one of the passions that I had. So I was like 19 years old, like I had I didn't have a chance to play professionally, but at the same time I I thought I could have some opportunities with soccer. So I started like looking for some scholarships. Like I was finishing that graduation, so I started looking for opportunities to continuing studying and playing soccer at the same time. But like in Brazil, we have some universities, they offer scholarships for people or for students that play a sport. So you don't pay for university and you actually play for that university, like you represent that university as an athlete. So I started looking for scholarships, like sports scholarships in Brazil. But then I came across with something that I had no idea that existed, which was scholarships to play sports in the US. So this is basically where everything started, right? So I start searching for, like, learning more about it and searching for ways to get those scholarships, to access those scholarships. And then I found an agency. So this agency was basically a former athlete, a guy that played for a for a college in the US. So he came back to Brazil and he started this agency where he would help people with the same dream, with the same goal, like help potential students to get scholarship in American universities or colleges. So this is when it started. So when I was 19, like, I decided, okay, so if I want to go to the US, I better learn English. So I'm gonna start studying English, and then I can get a scholarship and move there and play soccer and study at the same time. So at that time, I started looking for places to learn English. So how do I learn English now? So my first option was a private teacher. So I thought, oh, maybe I could go for a private teacher and find like someone that could help me. But the thing with private teachers at that time is that it cost a lot of money. It was quite expensive for me, right? So I couldn't afford that. So then I started looking for other options. So I start, like, going to English schools in Brazil. Like, we have those English schools in Brazil. And the problem with English schools was that it took a lot of time to learn English, and I wanted to move quickly. So I was about to graduate from college. So my plan was graduating from college, like, at in the end of the year, and then move to the US in the middle of the next year. So basically 6 months. I had 6 months to learn English and move to the US. All right. So to make a long story short, I found, uh, you guys might be familiar with that, but there is something called Kumon in Brazil. It's like a Japanese school. They have a memorization method, and they had like an English course. So I decided to enroll in this course and start studying English there. And that was a good decision at that time because they promised me, like, I would learn faster than in regular courses, and the price was quite good. It was okay, right? It wasn't cheap, but I could afford it. It was good. So then I started studying at Kumon, but something happened. I got injured, right? So I broke some ligaments in my ankle. So I had to go through surgery. So guess what? No soccer for a year. So that goal that was about to happen, I had to step back. So I basically, at that time, I gave up. I said, okay, here's the thing. I'm not playing soccer for a year, so I might be too old to pursue this dream. So probably I'm just gonna let it go. So I basically gave up. And giving up that opportunity, I automatically gave up on studying and learning English, right? So I decided to quit the course. So I wasn't studying English anymore. But then what happened, like, moving fast forward, I think 1 or 2 years ago, about that, I was going to the gym with this friend, little Bruno. Bruninho. Yeah, it's been a long time I don't talk to him, but I was going to the gym with this friend, and he was telling me about this program, like, oh, Alan, I know you like soccer, you're quite good, so you might have I might have something that you might be interested in. So one of my friends is moving to the US next year to study in a university and play soccer. And I was like, man, you won't believe it. Like 2 years ago, I had the same opportunity, like I was learning English, studying to go abroad, but I had this surgery, so I basically gave up. And he told me, no, man, you shouldn't give up. You're still young. You're 21. So give it a try. And then I was like thinking about it, like, oh, man, maybe this is the universe telling me I should try again, right? And that's what I decided to do, right? For the second time, I decided to pursue this opportunity to go to the US and get a scholarship. And this is what happened, right? So I connect with another agency and they were helping me to find schools and access scholarships at that time. And same thing happened again, right? So but at this time, things were more, I would say I was more focused, right? So at that time, I was working in a good job. So I was working for the city of Sao Paulo. So I had some money. So I could afford uh, like more expensive courses. So I was studying physical education at that time, and then I found a private teacher, and I asked her how much does it cost for you to prepare me to take this test. So I need to take a test in 3 months. It's the TOEFL, and I don't have much English. So do you think is it possible to get a 45 score in 3 months if I study with you? And she said, yes, I can do my best, and this is the price. So we're gonna have classes twice a week, but you're gonna have a study plan, and you need to stick with this study plan, doing the extra work. So I guarantee you can have this 45 score. All right. So at that time, the price I was paying for the university, it was basically the same I would pay for my private classes with this teacher. So what I decided to do, I dropped out university, and then I used that money to pay for my private English classes. And here's the thing, that was the first time I was taking it seriously. It was the first time I was studying English for real, and it was really good. It was a good experience. But I have to be honest with you guys, I didn't learn that much of English having private classes. What I did was I got ready to take the test. That was the thing. I was ready to take the test, and I took it, and I got a 44 score. So that's funny, right? So I needed 45 and I got exactly 44. But as I was going as an athlete, the college gave us the opportunity to go there with this 44 score and take some assessment tests. So I would have to take an English test as soon as I got there. So that's what I did. And unfortunately, I was able to pass this assessment test, but I got like the most basic English classes in at the college, right? So it was full of international students, and I mean, it was like meant for people who doesn't speak English at all, which was my case at that time, right? So I'm just trying to tell you, like, I didn't learn English with the private teacher. The only thing she did for me was prepare myself to the test, right? So that's the thing. So okay, I spent 1 year and a half in the US, so I was learning by experience. It was very hands on. And to be honest, in the beginning, I was hanging out with my Brazilian friends for most part. So I would have all of my classes, I would have my Brazilian friends with me. And that was, I mean, it didn't help me that much because every time I had a question or every time I had to do some group work, I would go with them. So I wasn't really using English. I was using more Portuguese than English. But in my second semester, I decided to do something different. So I made sure I would take classes with no Brazilian people. So I was the only Brazilian in the class. So I was forced to speak English, you know? So there was no way out. So I was basically forcing myself to use English all the time. And that helped me a lot. And on the top of that, I got a job. So I was studying part time, like no Brazilians at all by myself, having to use my English, like try to use my English at the best of my ability. And after that, I would go to work. And of course, there is no Brazilian there, right? Actually, there was one. My best friend was there with me. But the thing is, we worked different shifts, right? So I would work nights and he would work afternoons. So it was very rare to have him there and speak Portuguese, right? So I was basically living English 24/7, 24/7, right? And that really helped me. After this 1 year and a half, I decided to come back to Brazil. I went back to Brazil, and this is when things got a little bit interesting because when I got back to Brazil, I said, well, now I lived in the US, so I got this international experience. I know how to communicate in English. I wasn't fluent at that time. I wouldn't consider myself fluent at that time. I would say I was like upper intermediate, like almost an advanced student, but I wasn't fluent at all. But I had this decision, right? In my heart, I decided I need to find a job where I can speak English, where I can use English. And I got my first job, and it was in a sports club, right? In a very rich neighborhood in São Paulo. And then I got this, it was related to the field I studied in college, which was sports management and physical education, but there was no English at all. No English. So I stayed there for 1 month and I decided to quit. I said, no, that's enough. Uh, I'm not happy here. I'm not using English, so I'm gonna quit. And then I got a second job in a school, but I was working in the finance department. And for that job, I lasted like 1 day. I quit on my second day. And that's so funny because my family, they didn't believe. They said, man, how can we quit a job? How can you quit a job on the second day? And that's what I did because I had this decision in my heart. I need to find a job where I can speak English. So then I started searching for jobs, like, and the keywords like in my search would be English. And then a lot of English schools would come up, but I wasn't sure if I could be a teacher. I wasn't sure if my English was enough to teach people, right? But I decided applying to the jobs anyway, and then people start calling me for interviews. And I took about 3 or 4 interviews, and I was like all of the job, like I wasn't accepted. I wasn't a good candidate, so they just let me go. And this last interview, I said, okay, so this is gonna be my last interview. So if I get the job, that's great. If I don't get the job, I'm just going to move up and try to find different jobs. So I got this interview at Wise Up, the English school Wise Up. And this is where I met Genius, for example, one of my best students ever, right? So I remember going to this interview kind of hopeless, but at the same time, I was like, man, this is going to be my last chance. So I need to do my best. I need to be great. I need to, even if I'm not confident, I need to pretend I am confident. So that's what I did. I showed up to the interview and I met this lady, Katia, which I will be forever grateful. But I actually met also Bia, the one who really not hired me, but the one who interviewed me. And I remember meeting her, and when you see a person and you click right away, I said, I don't know. I like her energy. I don't know. I don't know how to explain, but I just felt like good around her. And I felt like I could speak whatever I wanted to her and I would be fine. And she was very young, very talkative, very friendly. So then I just start talking and talking and talking to Bia. And I remember once I finished the interview, I felt like really good. I felt like I don't know if I will get this job, but even if I don't, I'm just happy to like that I had that opportunity to talk to someone in English and speak myself up, like no issues, and I was feeling great. And for my surprise, I got a call at that time from Katia, and she was telling me, "All right, Alan, here's the thing. We interviewed three candidates and we have two, like, I mean, she said we selected three candidates, but we actually have uh oh, thanks man, I'll keep going. um she said I have three candidates for the job, but I have only two spots, like two people will be hired, but I will be sending the three of you to the interview, no, to the training. And then there you go. So it was like a very, very hard training, like 2 weeks long. And I remember going to the training, and it was so hard that sometimes I would sit on my couch and just think, oh man, I don't want to go today. This is so hard because I was comparing myself to the other ones, to the other candidates, and to all the teachers that were there. And I was like, oh, my English is so poor. I'm not that articulate, and those people are speaking so clearly and so fluent. They are amazing teachers. They are like they have experience, and at that point I have never taught before. So I was like, man, what I'm doing here, I don't know if I can like get this job. But I decided to stick with the training, and for my surprise, like on the third day, the guy who was competing with me and my other colleague for the job, he gave up. He gave up. For some reason, he just gave up. And I thought, oh, well, so now it's just me and her. And even if I don't do that good in this training, that means I have a chance because they have two spots and it's just me and her now. And then I decided to stick with it until the end, and I was hired, right? So I was hired by Wise Up and I worked there for 3 years, almost 3 years, 2 years and 9 months, something like that. And to be honest with you, as I said, I wasn't fluent at that time, but I was teaching people, even advanced students. So what I would do, man, I would study a lot before every single class. I remember like I had very it was difficult for me to explain or understand, for example, the past perfect or the present perfect. And I remember going to my coordinator at that time and, man, you gotta help me. I have no idea what I'm gonna explain. We'll be talking about present perfect today, so I don't know how to explain that. So please, man, give me some tips, give me some ideas. And he was always so kind and said, Alan, you got this, man. Like, imagine you need to get this hard concept and explain to a child, a 5-year old child. You can do it. So I would study like for like the classes used to be like 50 minutes, but I would take like 2 hours to prepare the class. So I would spend like 2 hours of my day preparing the class. So I studied a lot to be a teacher, right? To learn how to be a teacher. So that's when my English basically skyrocket, right? So that's why I always tell people, if you wanna learn something, try teaching that to other people, right? If you wanna make sure you understood something, try to explain that to others. So this way, for sure, you understood and you learned that topic, right? So that's what happened with me. And then at that time, I also started teaching some private classes. So, like, it had been 3 years teaching at Wise Up. So then I decided to get some private students, and I eventually quit the job, right? So I got another job. I got back to the education field. So I wasn't teaching, but I was working with uh, kids in a public school, but as a educator assistant, something like that. But I was still teaching my private students. So that's what I did, and I kept teaching from 2013 when I started at Wise up until last year. So I taught English for 10 years, right? And last December, I actually gave my last private lesson. So I basically retired from teaching, right? So that means I'm not teaching English anymore. But I came up with this idea of creating a system or creating a page or a platform where I can share things with people that are still interested in learning English. So that's why I created this podcast, and that's why I created the Teacher Alan profile on Instagram, right? So I told you guys basically how I learned English. Now I'm telling you guys a little bit about my story of teaching English. So now I'm gonna talk about future plans. So, podcast. So, this is something that I've been passionate about. So, I used to listen to podcasts like 5 years ago when I was still teaching and learning English, and podcasts they help me a lot. Like my skills, my listening skills went through the roof, right? So nowadays I can basically understand everything anyone tells me in English. And when I say anyone is because I'm living in Canada now, and I know that we learn the concept of American Standard English, or even at school uh, we might learn a little bit of British English or American English, but there are much more than that, right, guys? There's like different accents. Like here in Canada, we have people from India, Nigeria, even the Canadian accent. It's similar to the American accent, but there are some differences, right? So you gotta get used to understand everyone, right? You gotta be able to communicate to like with everyone. So listening is one of the most, if not the most important skill, right? Of course, speaking is really uh, it's essential, but also listening is really important. Reading and writing are also important, right? If you have a job, you need to write emails in English. You have to read content in English. This is important. But when it comes like to daily life where you need to talk to people and like go to a restaurant or book a room in a hotel, so speaking is very important, and also listening, understanding what people uh, are trying to communicate with you. So here's the thing, here's the plan. So podcast is back, is officially back. So that was the first episode of this new season. So Teacher Alan in the podcast, and next week, I'll be recording another episode with a very special guest, a very good friend of mine. And the podcast will be 100% in English, right, guys? So here's the thing, this is the opportunity for you to practice your listening, right? So this is why I created this podcast, right? So don't forget to check this out, subscribe, go to YouTube, find Papo Fluente, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you follow Papo Fluente, right? So I'll be posting every week I'll be posting a new episode. This is my goal. And I don't want to say I will promise, but I'm really, really confident that I can be consistent now, right? So I finished my college, I got my jobs, but I'll take the summer off from one of my jobs. So podcast will be back for sure. Okay, so stay tuned. This is number one. Number two, Teacher Alan. Can you believe I got this name? Can you believe that? It's so funny because I see so many teachers on Instagram and they have like their first and last name, and I found a way to get just my first name, Teacher Alan. Pretty straightforward, right? So if you go on Instagram and type Teacher Alan, you're gonna find my page. And what I'm gonna do in this page, here's the thing. I I've been posting stories in English here on Papo Fluente, right? But now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna post those stories in English, recording some of my routine in English on that page. Okay? So you guys go check it out. Teacher Alan, I will be posting like stories in English that you can also practice your listening. But I will also be posting some tips, some fun facts, and I'll be also on the feed, right? But I'll be also using some Portuguese there, right? And the focus, as I said, is survival English. I'm not promising you'll be fluent in 3 months. I'm not posting like I might do some here and there, but I don't want to post grammar things or even like those quick tips that you see, like pronunciation tips. I don't want to do that. I think many people are doing that already and they are doing a very good job. So I don't feel the need. As I said, I might post something along these lines, but this is not the idea. The idea is to focus on survival English. It's giving you tools that you can use to communicate in English, right? On a daily basis, right? If you want to go to a restaurant, if you want to travel to Disney, if you want to, I don't know, like just have a conversation in English, I will help you with that. Okay? So stay tuned, follow the page, Teacher Alan, and you can expect great content in there, right? So I know I talked a lot. I'm very grateful for everyone who participated here today. Uh, I don't think I have anything else to share. So those are the most important things I wanted to share with you guys. So first one, podcast is back, and now we have a second page which is Teacher Alan, and you guys can go check it out. All right. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode and sticking with me during this live. I appreciate your time and your attention, and we talk soon. Bye.